残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ
次の最後は涙じゃないよずっと苦しく背負ってくんだ出口見えない感情迷路に誰を待ってるの白いノートに綴ったようにもっと素直に吐き出したいよ何から逃れたいんだ現実ってやつかない
Hey everyone, welcome back to the AdCast, podcast for study of modern visual culture. I'm Renu, your Aibo alchemist, because today we're talking about Fullmetal Alchemist, and I am joined by my lovely co-host, the Soup Alchemist.
Hello, I do nothing but transmute soup into other soups.
I feel like Arakawa could probably come up with a good creative use for that.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So yeah, before we get into all of the alchemists, what have you been up to?
I have been up to, you know what? I'm gonna be honest. Mostly what I've been doing is just watching Fullmetal Alchemist.
So me a couple weeks ago.
Right, because for some reason I decided that it would be a great idea to watch the entire original series and then to watch Brotherhood. And then also to get as far as I could in the manga, but by that point I was just like, like my eyeballs.
Yeah, I did that too, except like I was like, I didn't even get into the manga. I had the goal of reading the manga after I'd finished all the anime stuff, but then I just never got around to it.
Well, I got 11 episodes, or 11 chapters into it, rather, so...
There you go.
I got somewhere, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, mostly I've really just been watching Fullmetal Alchemist.
Good use of your break.
And I have also been playing a lot of Granblue Fantasy, which is what got me through all of Fullmetal Alchemist.
Uh-huh.
You have no idea how much Granblue Fantasy I've been playing.
I don't have any idea.
It's actually pretty silly, because I was ranked like
doing the Love Life thing now?
They're doing the Love Life thing, and
Okay.
you should play if you want the Love Live characters.
I don't really want them, but okay.
Yeah, but they're also giving away free rolls, so
I'm doing that.
okay. Well, you should grab them because they're SSRs at the very least, so they have the shiny gold border, and then you can feel nice about it when you look at them. That's the only reason I'm getting them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the second part starts at some point tonight. Oh, I think it's like 3 a.m. my time. Never mind. That's not doable for you.
Nope.
But yeah, I started at rank 89 to 90
Yeah.
before my binge. And then by the end of it, I was rank like 110.
Oh my god.
I hit high level.
Uh-huh.
I hit high level content. I made technically a 4th tier job, so the 4th row of jobs.
Yeah.
Except I basically cheesed it, and instead of doing one of the other character, because they have, so the way that the classes work is that for the 4th row of classes, you need to unlock and element change a weapon. And each weapon corresponds to a class, and you use the weapon with that class, ideally.
Okay.
But there's a thing you can do where there's extra classes, and then there's extra 2 classes. So there's like row 2 extra classes, and for those classes you have to element change the specific weapon for that class, because the row 4 classes you can unlock as soon as you element change any of the class champion weapons, but the X2 ones are not like that. So I did Murakumo, which is the one for the samurai class, and I unlocked Kengo, and then that also unlocked all the row 4 classes. And basically all you need to know about it is it takes such a ridiculous amount of materials, it's not even funny.
I don't know anything of what you just said, so I'll trust you.
Trust me when I say it took a really long time.
I believe it.
But I did it. I did it.
Good job. Congratulations.
Yep. Yep. I've been making good progress in Grand Blue Fantasy.
You're gonna be the most OP, and you'll carry me to victory too.
Listen, I'll carry you to victory anytime you want me to.
Thanks,
Like,
buddy.
if you want to just go in and like hit a boss once, I'll just carry the rest for you. Don't worry about it.
I tend to do that. Get into a raid way harder than I can ever handle and hit it once, and then all my reserve members come out and I'll just sit there until it's done.
It's okay. That's how you're supposed to play Grand Blue Fantasy. It's really just that until you get to a point where you can be the person who does damage.
That'd be great.
But yeah, other than that, I'm still not in the exciting part of my break, technically. Or I'm in the lull between exciting things. I'm going to go to New York on Thursday.
Oh.
So a day after the podcast is supposed to air. Although I might upload it early depending on when my schedule aligns. Because I have some other stuff to do this week.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm gonna book a flight to Europe and be there for a bit.
Oh, how long are you going to be in New York and Europe?
Well, I'm going to be in New York for like 4 nights, technically, I think.
Oh.
So we leave Thursday and we come back Sunday. No, Monday? Monday. Yeah, we come back Monday. And basically I'm going to book the flight to Europe tonight because I think the money just came in for that in my account. So I'll do that, and I'll probably stay there for around 2 weeks.
Whoa, that's dope.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting because I've basically decided I'm going to throw all my plans out the window and just hang out, basically. I'm just going to go there and get lost on purpose, and
That's
hopefully something
explore.
Cool comes out.
Yeah, just be safe. But, that also is an adventure.
Hopefully. I couldn't convince any of my friends, so I will be going alone.
Oh my freaking god! Now I'm worried about you.
Listen, I'm fine. I'll be fine, probably.
No, I was gonna say, like, is our mutual friend Scythe gonna be there while you're there?
Is he still in France?
Yeah, he's still in France right now.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know if I'll go to France.
Oh,
I
where are you going?
Yeah, I don't know, dude. I think I'm just gonna like fly into Stockholm and figure it out from there.
Oh my god, you need more of a plan than that.
Trains.
You're stressing me out.
I'll just go there, get some food, figure out trains, how they work, and then I'll just be.
I mean, I'm also really loosey-goosey about my plans too, but I at least set days for things. Like, if I'm going to be in another country, right? It's just like, okay, I need to make sure that I see all the things that I want to see in the limited amount of time I have. So I should divvy it out like this.
Oh, see, I have no idea what I want to see, so I'm just going to go walk around until I see something cool.
Oh my gosh. I want you to be there with someone. Oh my gosh.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Who let you go alone? Oh my god.
Listen, my friends are busy or have no money or both. This is how it be. It's just how it be.
This is why I'm the parent.
I mean, I preferred to go with somebody, but it just didn't work out that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be extra careful.
All right. What are you been up to?
Check in with me every now and then.
Okay. I'll make sure. I'll make sure I'm still alive.
Okay. Anyway, what have I done? So a long time ago, not a long time ago, maybe like a couple of years ago, I tried to give JoJo a chance, right?
Okay.
From the beginning, like I popped up season 1, episode 1, and then I dropped it after like halfway through episode 1.
Okay.
And so then I was like, no, I'm going to try really hard this time. And so I made it through episode 1, like a couple of days ago. And I was like, oh my God, that was so much. I need to take a break. And then
Okay.
I finally watched episode 2 yesterday.
Wow. Wow. Amazing.
Oh man, I have so many conflicted feelings about JoJo. But just based on like what I saw so far. Because I have a lot of friends who love JoJo. And so I really want to, you know, be able to talk with them about it and understand the phenomena that is JoJo. But I feel like I have to work through a lot of things before I get to the stuff that I'll really like. And episode 1 made it really difficult for me. But
that's what I hear. I think the
Yeah.
first season is... The seasons are, like, the arcs of the story are vastly different to each other to almost a ridiculous degree. And not that I've ever seen it, mind you, but this is just what I've heard. And that the first one is the most, like, kind of generic.
That's what I've heard too. That the good stuff doesn't come into the later seasons. So I'm like, okay, I guess I just got to get through like the build up and all the origin stuff, right? Like where you figure out where the JoJos come from and where Dio comes from. Oh my God. It was so hard, Soup. Like spoilers for like episode 1, but there's some very serious animal abuse / death in episode 1, and it hurt.
I see. Womp womp. Okay, hang on. I will probably watch JoJo actually now that you've mentioned it, because I do need something to watch while playing Grand Blue Fantasy, because I rented a Fullmetal Alchemist, right?
Yeah.
So I watched the entirety of 7 Deadly Sins.
Oh my God.
And then I watched the entirety of Overlord.
Oh my God.
And now I'm halfway through my, Little Witch Academia.
Oh.
So, you know, I'm just using this as an opportunity to catch up on all the things that I missed.
I think JoJo could be a good fit then, because you don't
There's just a lot of it.
need to pay a whole lot of attention to it. You need to pay some, right?
Yeah,
But
I will say, I do think it's perfect because it has
good,
just the right amount of action and like stuff like that. But at the same time,
Exactly.
I'm getting pretty good at watching things while playing. Specifically things that have subtitles. At first I was a little worried. I was like, is this gonna be okay? Turns out it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I have done the Grand Blues while watching anime, and it was fine.
Sometimes I play Grand Blue while watching the anime that we watch together, because sometimes it's boring.
I agree. I have done this.
I don't remember specifically what show it was during, but I've definitely just been like, well, I'm only paying half attention.
I'll admit that even though I've been enjoying Hanebado, I do multitask during Hanebado, because I'm that person that, like, if I immerse myself too much in the very ridiculous heavy drama, I'll get really angry at the show and stop watching. So I have to like take myself back out of it.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, whatever. It's good.
Yeah.
Love me some Grand Blue Fantasies.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, stuff that I really liked about JoJo is like how well they animate all of the manga aesthetics. So I've been living for that.
Man, the aesthetic is so weird, and it's kind of great.
It's kind of great seeing like these children that look like grown adults, and then when they actually reach adulthood, you're like, oh, I ain't seen nothing yet.
Right, you're like, oh, you've gone from like what I imagined a man to look like to like a super, like a man. You've become like a double man.
Yeah.
No, I get you. Yeah, it's so funny. I love seeing the side-by-side shots of like one of the JoJo characters, and it's like 17, and then like another character who's like 20, but like looks so much younger because anime.
It's good.
It is very good.
Yeah, I think that's all I've been up to, really. Attempting to watch JoJo and preparing for conventions and stuff. I think we'll both be traveling around the same time.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, obviously the podcast is going to have to take a little break when I'm not here, but like we'll miss like a week out of I mean, we only obviously update twice a month usually, but we'll miss one of those. So
no. What will we do?
What will we do? Oh no.
We will suffer.
Well, this week AT stands for Alchemist Tragedy, because we're going to be talking about Fullmetal Alchemist.
Whee!
Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist. We should have done that for the opening.
That intervention, Fullmetal Alchemist.
God, that's how we should have started the podcast. We should have started it with Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist.
Yes.
Okay. You say Fullmetal Alchemist, and I'll say Fullmetal Alchemist slightly differently.
Okay. I'll do that creepy one that he does where it was like, Fullmetal Alchemist.
Do it.
I just did it. Go.
Fullmetal Alchemist.
Oh my god, wow.
I love that also I watched on Netflix, and Netflix uses the I guess like the Blu-ray or something as their basis, which makes sense. But it's so funny to hear, like, you know, to watch it in Japanese and have the whole thing be going on in Japanese, and then in the middle just in English, Fullmetal Alchemist.
Yeah.
Shing! Fullmetal Alchemist. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? Did you watch the sub or the dub?
I watched the sub for both.
Okay, me too.
Okay.
And the reason I'm gonna be honest, the reason I did it was twofold. So the first reason was I started with the original series, and the English dub of that is bad. Which is, I think, kind of funny, because the voice casts for the two are pretty similar. They get you know, Vic Menamanim back for Ed, and I mean, he does a better job in Brotherhood. Like, he's just a better voice actor by then. But even more than that, I couldn't handle. Okay, I did it for maybe 3 episodes at most, because I could not handle the script writing and the translation for the dub of the original series. Because this was back in 2003 or 2004, when anime dubbing was, like, not amazing. And it's somewhat nostalgic, I have to admit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was just getting to a point where I couldn't bear it. I was like, the pain that I'm going through of listening to these people talk like cardboard cutouts is worse than the nostalgia that I'm getting from having watched this in English originally.
I felt the exact same way, and it basically got to a point where I was just like, I feel like I'm lessening my experience right now by forcing myself to rewatch the dub, because like I think the part that hurt, or at least like that I did not enjoy, was usually like the awkward pauses, you know, in the middle of a sentence, because they're trying to match the lip flaps.
Yeah.
And it throws off the entire pacing of their sentence structure and the tension or mood or whatever they're trying to convey with, you know, they're good voice actors, and then they get better later on. However, the script writing isn't super great, and then the fact that they also have to match timing is really difficult. And so it's gonna come out not super stellar and gonna sound awkward no matter what, right? So
yeah, it is not amazing. Not good. I will say that the script writing is a lot lot better by Brotherhood. Brotherhood is at least a watchable dub, if not like a good to great one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, gosh, all you have to look at is the one scene where Mustang is at Hughes's funeral, and like if you listen to, because I did this specifically, I listened to the English versions for all three, or for both of them, and then I also watched them in the subbed versions, and it's like so awkward in the original because the English translation is like, God, what is it? It's just like, oh, it sucks that it's raining or whatever. I mean, obviously it's not that bad, but like it is so it is stiff. It's bad. It's just like someone literally translated it, dolled up the grammar to make sure it made sense, and then just stuck it in. Whereas in Brotherhood, you know, he says like, "Oh, it's a terrible day for rain," which is an amazing line to convey the feeling behind that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I love Travis Willingham.
Travis Willingham is great.
How did it feel listening to this and just hearing like half of Critical Role?
It was pretty awesome. I was like, oh, Laura Bailey. Oh, Travis. Oh, they're killing each other.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, those are the only two scenes that I watched in English for all of them.
And
oof.
Yeah, it was rough. Like, I think there's a part when I was cleaning my apartment, and it was during one of the fillers, so I was just like, okay, I'll just put the English dub on. And that was rough. I was vacuuming, and I could barely hear it, and it was a little rough.
Yeah, it's not... dubbing got a lot better in the 6 years between these two series.
I'm glad at the strides we made, and I do still have like a certain nostalgia for 2000s dubs, but I will prefer, you know, the sub in this case.
In this case, I think that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some dubs are bearable from that era, but this is not one of them. is I think the way that I would put that.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about it, man. Let's talk about how the original series, quote unquote original, is compared to what little I've read of the manga and also to Brotherhood.
Sure.
Okay, so for those that do not know, the original series covers to a certain point in the manga, but then they ran out of manga, so they had to have their like anime only sort of ending, right?
Yep.
And Brotherhood is the opposite, where they phone in basically the first 16 or so episodes.
Yep. Because
the original series already covered it better. And then the last 50 or so episodes are covering what was covered in the manga, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they do different things, and I do think it's valuable to watch both of them, because I will say that I think the original series does some of the emotional beats in the story better than the manga, even, because I think
100%, yeah.
Because I think it had time to develop and hit those beats.
Yeah.
Whereas even in the manga, like, so, like, this is the one thing that gets, I feel like, brought up a lot, and obviously it's like the thing that we have to talk about, and the thing that I'm going to bring up, which is the Show Tucker thing.
Yes.
So the Show Tucker thing happens over the course of one episode in Brotherhood, 2 episodes in the original series, and 1 chapter in the manga.
Yeah.
And of all of them, the original series hits the hardest.
Yeah.
Because they build up the relationship between Show Tucker and his daughter and the Elric brothers in a way that is a lot better, and it turns the emotional turnaround of like the plot twist of that arc into something that actually hits pretty hard.
Yeah, I liked the I do have to say, like, I like the juxtaposition that they set up in Brotherhood, where When Ed and Al are first arriving in Central, they stay with Hughes's family. And, you know, it's a really nice, pleasant environment. It's a nice, happy family. You get to see Gracia and you know, and then it's all innocent, right? And then later on is when they meet Sho, and you don't really see it coming, you know, all the stuff that goes down with his daughter. Whereas in the original series, yeah, they do have that build-up, because in the original series, they tell it in a way that Ed hasn't become a state alchemist yet. And so he's taking the exam, and so he's staying with Sho to learn some stuff, maybe research some of that life alchemy that he's got going on at his place that he's researching. And then you get a really close bond because the boys and Nina and their doggo all get to play together and spend time together. And you don't ever predict that something is going to happen until maybe like somewhere in the middle of like the second episode, you start having suspicions because Sho is getting really, really pressured, and you can see it starting to affect him. And yeah, it hits you like a truck. And because the pacing in Brotherhood, and I guess the manga too, is so fast, you don't get that slow, like lulled into a sense of security.
Yeah. And I mean, in this case, Brotherhood is actually closer to the manga in terms of how it follows that storyline, but I think the original series does it better.
Yeah,
like,
I think so too.
I think placing it chronologically before the exam and having them build up to it is like it is. I think it hits all of the kind of emotional beats, which is like a thing I've been saying a lot. But the reason that it works is because Sho Tucker goes from being like a dude that's just kind of evil, right, in the manga and Brotherhood, to somebody who is like a sympathetic but twisted individual, right?
Yeah,
because
I agree.
In Brotherhood in the manga, the deal with Sho Tucker is that, you know, he wants to do this thing because science and, you know, whatever, fuck ethics, I guess. But in the original series, and I think we get glimpses of this in the manga and in Brotherhood, but in the original series it develops it a lot more. And I think this is the case for a lot of the original series, which is that it actually handles a lot of the characters pretty well. I think it gets a lot of flack for how off the rails its ending goes. Yeah. But, you know, in terms of actual characters, I think a lot of them it handles honestly really, really well. Like, the thing about Sho Tucker is that he's not just some evil dude, right? He is obviously somebody who, you know, went through a lot of trouble and a lot of hardships to get to where he was and to live in this like big house. And obviously, like, okay, he transmuted his wife. That's fucked up. Yeah. But it gets you know, and because Sho Tucker doesn't die in the original series until much, much later. And does he even die at all? I actually don't remember. It functionally doesn't matter.
He disappears.
Yeah, he like disappears, but functionally he's, you know, he's not dead in the first, you know, part of the series. And so you get a little bit more into it, and it paints this figure who is like a really good foil to Edward as an alchemist, because you know, they're both doing it for the sake of their family. It's just that Sho Tucker made a wrong turn. And I think that the original series, what they get really, really down is, you know, because Sho is helping them, you know, become state alchemists, or helping Ed become a state alchemist, you get to build a lot more of, you know, Sho Tucker is somebody who worked really hard to be in the position he's in. He's not, like, you know, gifted with alchemy necessarily, right? It's something that he studies. Whereas, you know, Edward is someone who can be perceived to be a genius because he's only 12 when he takes the exam. Yeah. Right? Yep. Even though that's not necessarily the case, because it is and it isn't. Because obviously, you know, his blood is like, oh, your dad was an alchemist, like, you know.
Right.
And you grew up around alchemical books. You know, growing up in that kind of environment where you have easy access to that will make it so that you are more apt to that. But it's not that he was like, it's not that he got there through talent alone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the fact that in the original series, it eventually ends up that Sho Tucker is, you know, trying to use the Philosopher's Stone to create a Nina, right? It kind of capstones this arc of just a broken man trying to protect his family. Even if the way that he got there was by transmuting his entire family.
It's kind of like he gets so caught up in the process of like providing for his family that he doesn't end up actually end up preserving his family. And I think that's it's a powerful message, because that is something that people can relate to, like on a less magical sense, quote unquote, because that's something that happens in real life where, you know, there are a lot of families out there that, you know, a parent might go through really long hours, work like 3 jobs, something like that to provide for the kids. But the kids feel like because their parent is so stressed and everything like that they have no bond with that parent, or that parent, because they have so much pressure, that they might lash out at their family or something like that and end up actually damaging the family more than they're helping. So I think there are a lot of parallels like that in Fullmetal that are really, really, they hit so hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of ideas about parenthood in, I mean, it's a really big theme actually in the series. And you get that through all the different characters, because, you know, you have Hohenheim, who just fucking leaves. He just goes. He's like, oh,
a prime example of the absent parent.
The absent parent. You got dead parent.
Yeah.
You have Izumi, who is, I want to be a parent, but uh-oh.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the biggest themes in Fullmetal Alchemist is about family. Because obviously the series is carried by the bond between the two brothers and everyone around them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Edward literally sacrifices his arm. Like, it's like, take my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think having it be 2 episodes and having it be a gradual build up because of, you know, that lead up to the exam it lends to a better arc. Because I think in the manga it's not necessarily like a throwaway, but it's not one of the most important points. Whereas in the original series, because they do have time to develop it, right? They do, and it feels good.
Yeah. I think probably because in the manga, in the grand scheme of things, the Sho Tucker episode isn't as powerfully related to everything else that's going on. And that's why it's not really treated as super important, but it is important, like you said, as a foil to what Ed could have been if he was too scientifically focused and cold towards his fellow human beings. And I really like, at least in the original series, I don't know if they do in the manga, but how they place the whole Liore arc basically right before they show the Tucker arc, because you meet Rose, who is very, you know, sympathetic towards other people. You know, she's very emotional, she's very faithful and dogmatic, and that's very sharply contrasted to Ed, who's like all science and stuff like that, and he even like berates her while she's praying in the church and all this other stuff, and kind of like, in his opinion, I guess from his point of view, gives her like a slap of reality, like, you know, your priest Cornello he's a sham, blah blah blah, and it destroys her. And it makes Ed come off as really cold and really being that cold scientist. But then you see towards the end that he is human. He's just trying to teach her how to be strong and stand on her own 2 feet. And then right after that, you get to see like the absolute opposite swing of the spectrum with Show Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Show Tucker arc is actually also really important when it comes down to how it affects the two brothers, because I think it is a little understated just how much of a driving force that becomes for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is the moment when, and I do see that's the reason I actually also really like the fact that it's contrasted with the Lior arc, because it is, you know, it is this moment when Ed realizes that, you know, he's just like an insignificant human being.
Yeah.
And like I think he says something pretty much to that effect, where he's just like, you know, I'm just an insignificant human being who can't even save a little girl, right?
Yeah.
So it's I feel like his kind of, you know, his hostility towards Rose, you know, blindly believing in Father Cornello is in part an admonishment of himself, even, for thinking that he can play God and
I think so too. Yeah.
You know, transmute his mom back to life. And I mean, that's I think what is so cool about Fullmetal Alchemist as a series is that all of the, you know, there's a lot of this like kind of overarching plot stuff that happens, but all of it comes down to being motivated by characters and by character desires. And in a lot of ways, when it comes to the protagonists, all of their tragedies come as a result of their good traits, right? Like, right. This is kind of the mark of a tragedy, which is that, you know, someone's boons, someone's good traits are what inevitably lead them to sadness, right?
Right.
Like the Elric brothers are loving and they're smart, and, you know, they will do anything for their family, to the point where they, you know, commit the ultimate alchemical taboo, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think that's so important to discuss. Yeah. Because that's like a common theme with a lot of the characters in this story, but also people in general, is like everyone thinks that they're doing the right thing. But then if you take a step back and if you're able to step outside of yourself and see how far you're going with it, then you're able to see like, oh, it's a bad thing. But you don't think of that in the moment, because you're so like highly invested in what you believe in and in your own ideals that you don't see it. And that's when the tragedies are born.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, you know, in a lot of ways, they end up becoming kind of unavoidable. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Your greatest strengths become your greatest weaknesses in a sense. And yeah, I will say that the thing that I really like about it is that all of the characters, I feel like, can act as foils for each other, and especially like the main cast and the homunculi, etc., etc., etc. And the fact that we get to see that unfold so gradually is so interesting.
Yeah.
You know, you have Ed and Al. So Ed and Al are on this journey to basically make things right, you know, whereas Scar is also on a very similar journey, you know, to make things right in his own vision. And they're both motivated by very similar things. Yeah. But then their paths diverge. And so you can kind of look at these two characters as two sides of a coin, where, you know, if Show Tucker is like the reflection of Ed's scientific pursuit at any cost, you know, Scar is this desire to make things right and to atone at any cost.
Yeah, I think the contrast between Ed and Al versus Scar is really, really such an important driving force of the series, because you have Ed and Al, who they have in their own minds basically lost everything, right? They lost their mom, they burned down their own home, they lost their bodies, they have no father, essentially, and they're on a quest to, at the very least, get something that they can get back, which is their bodies. And then contrast that with Scar, who he would basically be in Alphonse's position, right? He's he has his body, but he's lost everything else, right? It's almost like the opposite. And I think that the way that you get to see how they change each other is so cool. Like Alphonse's compassion towards Scar, and also Scar basically, there are key moments in the series where he kind of like, by observing their brotherly bond, goes softer on them, right? Because he's reminded of his own bond with his brother. But at the same time, he's still committed to his ideals and getting revenge for Ishval. And so I love that the author makes them both so central, and you follow both of their journeys throughout the whole series.
I mean, it's nice because they build so naturally too, and that's like I think one of the greatest strengths that Fullmetal Alchemist has, which is everything happens so gradually, but never in a boring way. It always feels like things are being built on top of already existing things, and when something new is introduced, you know, it's there for a reason. I will say that I liked the episode about the fake Edward Elric. Apparently, okay, so I didn't know this, but apparently this was adapted from the first light novel, which I didn't know there were light novels.
Me neither.
But I also liked that episode as a foil for them in kind of a blatant, obvious, kind of ham-fisted way. And I think this goes pretty broadly for the original series as a whole, which is it's a lot less subtle about its themes than Brotherhood is even, and the manga is, because in a sense, like, Brotherhood does this thing where, you know, Father, the homunculus, you know, dwarf in the flask, says like, just says outright, like, yes, you lost your bodies to hold your families with, and the man who only stared at the future lost his eyeballs, or whatever, right?
Oh yeah, when he was summarizing everything
when
that
he's
they
like
lost.
summarizing all this, and it's like, oh yeah, right? Like, that was probably the most blatant it gets in Brotherhood, but like the original series is kind of like that all the time. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty. It also, I mean, I will say, I think that for all of the faults that have been found in the original series, it is still entertaining, and it still does a really good job, especially with the earlier arcs, which I will get into later about why I think those are important. Yeah, and I think it does a pretty good job with the homunculi. I thought that the direction they went with, their, you know, originally failed human transmutation attempts was kind of interesting. Yes, and I do think that's interesting. They kind of go with this like lich phylactery situation where it's like, if you show them the bones of the person they were based on, they'll be weakened, which I thought, okay, that's pretty interesting. Sure. Now, I will say that there is. It begins to fall apart a little bit thematically when they start talking about that, because it's like, okay, I get it. Like, you know, them some plot holes. They start to appear. Not that they're not present in like in Brotherhood or like the original manga, but they're a lot smaller. They're a lot smaller. Yes. And it's because they don't really go into, and okay, one of the greatest sins of the original series is that they do not touch very strongly on my boy Greed, who's my favorite character. Yo, Greed! But even beyond that, you know, they get to a point where the homunculi as sin starts to not make a lot of sense. Yeah. You know, Sloth as you know, Ed and Al's mom kind of checks out. It's like, okay, you know, Sloth is the you know, standing still, not doing anything, staying in one place, which acts as a foil for Ed and Al, who have to keep moving forward. But then, like, Wrath makes zero sense whatsoever. Yes, child, anger, Okay. That's as far as I got. I couldn't think of anything.
Izumi's child with Ed's limbs.
Yeah, and like, all credit, they did go interesting places with that. It's like, oh, he can do alchemy, whereas normal homunculi can't because of that. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. But like, why do you have those? Like, you're from the other side, but then why did you cut? I don't get it. I
think they did explain it, which is that Wrath was one of the little purpley-eyed souls on the other side of the door.
Children, which I don't.
Yeah, and he was the one that, like, he basically used the opportunity while Ed was basically, sacrificing his limbs to grab them for himself. That's what he explained it as.
You know what?
But yeah.
I think the reason that I don't dig that is because I just like what the original does better.
Yeah.
And obviously I'll get into that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I will say I did feel something. Like, it's not like I was completely emotionless during the scenes when Ed is like killing his mom again.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a pretty good like capstone for that.
I think the parts where it started to lose me was even before that, was the whole Laboratory 5 thing. Like, after the bury the chopper and all that, but when Ed gets taken down to where they were making a Philosopher's Stone, and he has to debate whether or not to sacrifice the prisoners to make a Philosopher's Stone right then and there for Al. And he's really, really tempted and almost does it. I was like, freaking Ed, are you not?
Yeah, I wasn't super into that either.
Nothing. I was so angry because they just... Wasn't it before that he had that whole arc with even the filler arc with the Redwater and the fake Elrics, and then before that has Sho Tucker. Like, he has all of these examples of why he shouldn't sacrifice other people for the sake of a Philosopher's Stone, and even the Lior, right? And so that's like one of the parts of the series that I really just did not disagree with. That I thought that they mischaracterized him so much because it felt like they threw away all of that just to give him this, like, oh, he would totally be tempted by this right now because he's so focused on his goal. It's like he's never gone that far.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that's also something that Brotherhood does better, because they present that exact same moral quandary, but with Roy Mustang. And I think that's a much more interesting space to explore, because Mustang in that scenario is a much more interesting character, because Ed has already gone through that development.
Yes.
Whereas Mustang, we haven't seen necessarily do that.
I think so.
Okay. There is one character, I think, above all else that the original series handles better. And I think that's Lust. I think Lust is so much more interesting in the original series.
Yeah, I think so too. They gave her a whole backstory.
They gave her a whole backstory. They gave her motivation. Whereas in Fullmetal Alchemist, like the manga and Brotherhood, she's just kind of like an evil, sexy lady. I will say, I don't think that's such a cardinal sin for the manga and Brotherhood, just because of all of the other female characters in the series that are in contrast, that are as well developed as Lust is in the original series. I just like the fact that Lust was developed in the original series, and despite the fact that I think that it was kind of like a shoddy gambit to begin with, the whole thing about like, oh, homunculi just want to become human beings.
Right.
Just like, no, it just doesn't even remotely check out.
It doesn't ring for me either.
So here's the reason. Okay, the reason it doesn't ring for me is because it makes too obvious and too blatant something that is like, it's too. I think blatant is the right word. It's too blatant for what it is, because in the manga and Brotherhood, and it is understated, right? Like, it's kind of underlying the themes that it is like that, right? Where I think that for the most part, at least the homunculi that get developed and are explored are to some extent jealous of humans and have some desire to become humans, but as a result of father of homunculus being somewhat desiring of becoming a human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the original series, it's just like, okay, but why though? And I think Lust was really the only person, the only like homunculus who really had any stake in that whatsoever. And like also just like, did you really think even for a single second that Dante would make you human beings? Like that person is so obviously evil.
Just like that vampire in Sirius the Jaeger.
Yeah, it's just like it's so obvious that that's not gonna happen. Like, do any of you actually want that?
I think they addressed it once. I think maybe Ed or someone called them out on it in the original series, where they were like, "Did you really believe Dante was gonna do this for you?" And then I think it might have been Lust who was basically like, I mean, we had no choice. Like, she was our only chance, kind of thing. So I think that was their reasoning for it. But yeah, it was. And I think I've read other discussions about it too, where it's like maybe because of the way that they're born, that homunculi have this like innate sense of incompleteness, that they think that the way that it can be filled is by becoming human. And I think that you see it a lot with Lust, but you also kind of see it a lot with Wrath, because he's so desperate to get all of Ed's body for himself and then become human so that he can be with Mom or whatever.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I will say it is kind of like strange to me that they kept Wrath alive throughout the entire the entire series just to kill him off in Conqueror Shambhala. Yeah, like in the first 20 minutes, just immediately like ah.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I think the one part that I did like about Lust's arc in Brotherhood is basically the fight between her and Mustang. I think that was probably the only part that I enjoyed in that more than in the original series. But yeah, I think I think some of the way that they handled it was
listen, my God, it is maybe one of the best scenes in all of anime when Mustang kills Lust in Brotherhood.
It was so cool.
It is everything. Like, that is everything. My God. Okay, one more thing before we move off of the original series.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Frank Archer for just like a hot second?
Yeah, we need to talk about this.
Oh my God. I could not remember for the life of me who this dude was, and then he comes back as a cyborg. I couldn't handle it.
I think my jaw dropped because I had completely forgotten about this fool too. I was like, okay, so he's just like another evil guy that shows up and with Kimberly or whatever, fine. And then he like dies and comes back as half robot, and then you're like, what? And it makes zero sense in the canon of Fullmetal Alchemist, because they never had like a robot man show up before. I mean, you look at Al, he's a suit of armor. You think they have robots walking around? Yeah, they have
my God.
They have artificial limbs and whatnot, but they don't have artificial intelligence. I don't know, man. I think it was still his intelligence.
It was just like, it's just so much. It just goes so off the rails.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah. So,
I don't get it.
Archer came back as a robot, half robot.
It was it's nothing short of comical. I couldn't stop laughing.
It wasn't just a robot though. He like sprouted a gun from his mouth and then had like giant arms or something. Like, I can't even. He had so many firearms arms and his half robot body.
I have one more thing to say before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they make Rose so pale in Brotherhood? I didn't actually realize this until I went back and I read the manga and I watched the original series. But like, they make her like sickly pale.
It reminded me of something that they did in Detective Conan, which is one of the like minor characters, Takagi. He like starts off as tan and brown hair with like spiky brown hair, and then slowly throughout the 900 plus episodes now, he becomes a pale, like flimsy haired, I don't know, Japanese dude. Like he was always Japanese, but then he just slowly became more pale. But then between original series and Brotherhood for Full Metal, Rose just like her skin tone just flips a switch. I don't know. Maybe people were confused. Like they're like, oh, is Rose part Ishvala because she's pale? And it's like, I mean, because she's tan. It's like, no, there are other tan characters.
Yeah, I mean that's actually something that I found really interesting was that they can never identify an Ishvalan until they see their eyes, which basically implies that there are other characters with darker skin that aren't Ishvalans, which good choice. Good choice. Okay, I want to touch briefly on the manga because I know we both haven't read it super in depth. Like the last time I read this, I was like 12.
Yeah.
So I read the one shot.
Yeah.
And it is basically a mishmash of Lior and the mining town Usewell. And I feel like the kind of core of the series is already there. So it's really interesting to see how it evolved from there. Ed's terrible edgelord style is there, which
good.
I love that throughout both series. There's just like everyone constantly like. You think for a second, oh, you know, it just turns into looking like that because of alchemy. No, it's just because Ed has a terrible like sense of style.
He does.
Everybody in the series is constantly like egging him about it. It's so funny. Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have to say about the manga. I mean, Brotherhood obviously follows the manga closer, but I think the original series does some of the stuff better. But I think that's nothing new. So let's get into the meat of the discussion. Let's talk about Brotherhood, or at the very least,
Brotherhood.
The stuff that we can talk about with the Brotherhood.
Everything.
So the beginning gets shortened, and here is where I will go into why I think that is kind of lame. So the reason I really like the original series and the manga is because it is the manga, or the Fullmetal Alchemist as a work is kind of about this journey, right? You know, to the point where I'm pretty sure the last episode of Brotherhood is titled Journey's End. But like, the fact that there is a little bit of wandering around and kind of being lost is what makes it compelling to me. It's because Brotherhood is, the thing about Brotherhood is that the beginning is tight. It's like very tightly written to accommodate the fact that it is basically recapping 24 or so episodes of the original series.
Yes.
And the way they do that is basically they just take most of the two episode arcs and they shove them into one, and then some of them they just omit completely. Like that, I think that the beginning part of the series where they're wandering around not listlessly, but like trying to figure out, you know, clues here and there. And it's not even that many chapters. It's only like 11 or so chapters before they start to kind of get an idea of where to go, right? I think it's so important for the narrative because it is where they start to build relationships. It's where we start to get insight into Ed and Al as characters. You know, it's where we really start to build attachment to these characters and the ways that they affect other places. And because Hiromu Arakawa never forgets anything, by the end of this series, that shit comes up again.
I love that the freaking very first incident in Brotherhood wraps up all the way towards the end.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I feel like that might be the weakest link because it is a Brotherhood only thing, and it is there to wrap everything around again, which is fine. I think because it is only like an episode, it doesn't necessarily, it does a good job of doing what it's supposed to do, but it kind of leaves some other holes basically that I would like to have been filled. But I don't think it matters that much because, it's just like an introductory pilot, first episode sort of deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the wandering bit really, like, it sucks that we don't get to see the Usewell thing, like the mining town where Yoki comes
especially
from.
because they have Yoki.
Because Yoki comes back!
Yeah.
And then
anyone who doesn't know about it, I don't know.
And also when May is there, she's in Usewell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I also think that they do a better job of establishing the characters and attachment to the characters because I feel like they're really kind of phoning it in for Brotherhood. I mean, obviously it's a really tightly written 16 episodes or so before they start getting into where the actual main storyline is, but it kind of takes away from, and I mean, it doesn't take away entirely, right? By then you're already going to be attached to Ed and Al on their journey, but they're kind of hoping that you already are from having watched the original series or read the manga. They're just like, these are the characters you like.
I can see arguments for both ways in terms of like for what they did and against what they did, right? Obviously what we just went over is against what they did, but I can see arguments for what they did because they got actually a lot of criticism for the few episodes that they used to recap the same material in the original anime. Like, people thought it was boring, they thought it was dumb to go over the same material, but it was necessary, right? And I think, furthermore, another pro towards doing it the way that they did it is because it prevents people from making the original anime irrelevant, right? It makes the original anime worth watching because you get to see that further in-depth like development and attachment to characters that were kind of skipped over or, summarized too quickly in Brotherhood. And if they had done it the other way, where they basically combined the good parts of the original series and put it into Brotherhood would have been a freaking outstanding, perfect, amazing anime on its own, but then the original would basically be a waste of time.
I don't see any merit in keeping the relevance of an anime if you can just like do it again but better, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing is I understand why they did it. I just don't agree with it. And you know, financially it also makes sense why they did it because you're not, if it's airing week to week, you're not going to do that. You're not going to give each arc the same time and attention. You're going to wrap it up as tightly as possible so that you can get through it. And obviously they're going to receive criticism about it because people have already seen it. But like, it's, to me, Brotherhood would have been like 11 out of 10 perfect if it had everything. Yeah. I can see why it doesn't. I understand why it doesn't. I just would have preferred it to be like one whole thing because as it stands, I still have to go and recommend people 2 different shows, which is daunting.
Yeah, I understand the way that they did it, but I am of the same opinion of I would have liked to just have one series to refer people to. Granted, there are people who have only watched Brotherhood and love it to bits, and then they go and watch the original series if they are interested in it. Yeah, and I think it works either way. But I think the people who have the full experience of having watched both of them and then maybe even read the manga on top of that have, you know, a much better experience. But that's speaking to like a lot of series that do this kind of thing where they might have several different types of anime or series going on that tell the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a remake goes, it is like top tier, like top of the class. It is so good to the point where it's better than the original. Yeah, and that's pretty rare, honestly.
Yeah,
I can't think of anything off the top of my. Maybe like Hellsing.
Hellsing Ultimate was frigging fantastic.
Yeah, that's the only other one that really comes to mind.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, it sucks to me because to me, I value the way that the original series handles the first couple of arcs, and I also value that thematically as part of the journey because Brotherhood is so tight of a narrative, and like. This is a strength of Brotherhood that it's so tightly wrapped up in the first 16 episodes, the first couple arcs. It's like it's not lazy, it's not, you know, bad. It's actually really well written to be that tight. I just don't think it hits the emotional beats of the earlier arcs as strongly, and of course it has to omit some of the things that eventually come up again, which makes people go, what? Like, nobody knows who Yoki is unless you already know who Yoki is.
There was no way that they would have been able to dedicate a whole episode to use well.
Yeah, which sucks in because it would have been so good. And
yeah, I like that they summarized it in like 5 seconds.
It's like, who's this? Oh, that's
when
Yoki.
Yoki explains it. Yeah, he was just like, you did this to me, and then he lists it all at once, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, there's the context.
pretty much, yeah. Like the way that they kind of wrap it up is really like, as I said, it's really tight. It's really well done. I will say, whenever I watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, I always run into the same thing. Like always, where the first couple of arcs are so fast for me that I don't realize that they're over. Where I am like 8 or so episodes in, I'm like, they've already covered that much? Oh my god.
Yeah, right? I'm like, this thing took them like 20 episodes to cover, and they're only on episode 8.
So the first part always goes by really, really fast, and then the second part always goes by like way slower than I'm expecting it to.
Yeah, they slow it down a lot because they're like, we're into the manga material that we didn't cover in the other series.
It's not that I'm not like, it's not that I don't like it, because I don't think like the pacing is slow or anything, but when I'm on episode like 50 something, like 52 or 53, and they're like all grouping together to do like the promised day thing or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, so that we must be in the last 4 episodes. No, there's 10 episodes left. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, there's still more.
And I mean, it never drags, but I always forget how long it is.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I like Brotherhood so much, but I think part of the reason that I like it so much, and I mean, this isn't to say that you can't enjoy Fullmetal Alchemist while having only just watched Brotherhood, because I don't think that's true. Mm-hmm. But I still think that it is valuable for one's first experience with the show, if possible, to be watching both series in succession.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. I would have liked it if it could just been one. And usually if I'm recommending it, I just recommend Brotherhood. I'm like, yeah, it'll be better if you watch, the original series and then you watch Brotherhood, but I understand that people have time constraints and that they can't do that. And nobody I've ever recommended that to has ever watched both. So, that tells you really all you need to know. Like, if you say, oh, you can just watch Brotherhood, but it will be better if you do both, people will just watch Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
I think Brotherhood does a good enough job that as an introductory experience to Fullmetal Alchemist, it is good. It's really, really good. The only problem that I have is it lessens the impact of the original series, which at some points can be said to be a little bit melodramatic, and I think I would tend to agree.
My god, that whole episode where there was the one where freaking Al was freaking out about like, did you make up my soul?
I mean, okay, that happens in both of Brotherhood and the manga too, though.
I'm saying it does happen in both, but the way they did it in the original was like hair-pullingly dramatic.
Yeah, it was a lot.
The way that they did it in Brotherhood was so good. It was simple, it was succinct, it was just like Ed gets up and he walks out the room, and then Winry's the one who chastises Al, like, you motherfucker, you don't have any idea what Ed's been thinking this whole time.
Yeah.
And then the other one, like, in the original, Al jumps out a freaking window, he goes on a rooftop, and they yell at each other, and they cry, and oh god. That's just one example.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it lessens the impact of the first couple arcs, and then also you're getting basically like a subpar experience for the other half of the show that you like, other half of the show that you're watching. Basically, it's just like, okay, this goes off the rails and is a little confusing, whereas Brotherhood is somewhat confusing, but at least makes sense by the end. You can at least follow it. Whereas,
I mean,
the original is kind of like
wraps up really well, in my opinion. Like, yeah, if I were to rewatch, like, if I had to choose between which one to invest in my time to rewatch again, it would probably be Brotherhood for me, because
for sure,
enjoy the plot elements way more now that I already have the emotional attachment. It's like, okay, now I can like go through and like enjoy the genius of Arakawa's plot writing. Like, oh my gosh, it all wraps up and connects.
Yeah, it's thematically it's so strong, and like the characters are so well written and so strong. And the thing about Fullmetal Alchemist is that I feel like Fullmetal Alchemist is somewhat underappreciated as a series, which is kind of a weird statement to make about a series that is like universally beloved. But like, it is a series that is so well-rounded, sometimes you forget because nothing sticks to you. Like,
I think I'm tending to agree, because like when people think of like their favorite anime series, I've only heard a few people talk about like, oh, Fullmetal Alchemist, because it's such a mainstay that I think a lot of people just like, I don't know, they kind of forget that that it's something that they love, because it's already assumed that they love it. Maybe
they kind of take it for granted. I mean, I have said this again and again, but I think Fullmetal Alchemist is very much a workhorse series. You know, it is so well rounded that like there's no sharp edges for it to cling to you with, right? It's like the only people I've ever heard say Fullmetal Alchemist is their favorite anime are people who don't watch a lot of anime.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? And it's like if you watch a lot of anime, generally speaking, you will develop a different, you know, taste. But like Fullmetal Alchemist is something that is such wide appeal and is so universally recognized as being good that I mean, to some extent, I feel like it might just be that if you say that, you know, it sounds like you haven't seen a lot of anime, I guess, but like I guess so. Fullmetal Alchemist is, I will say, I think I will say this, like I will kind of put out a statement, which is I think that Fullmetal Alchemist is basically everyone's second favorite anime. Like it is an anime that everybody loves, basically. And one that it is like pretty hard to find faults in, but to the point where you almost take for granted how good it is.
Yeah, like, because everyone knows Full Metal, and they know the characters, they even know character arcs, and they certainly know Sho Tucker because he's freaking notorious.
Oh my god, there's so many Nina memes.
So many. She's been memed into meme heaven, but it is one of those things that's like it's good and such a mainstay that like if someone were to say that their favorite series was like, I don't know, like Naruto. People would be so quick to point out all the flaws in Naruto. But I feel like that's a little harder with Fullmetal. Like, yeah, it has plot holes, but like the plot holes are insignificant compared to the whole series.
If you said that Fullmetal Alchemist is your favorite series, you would just get some like a kind of approving nod to be like, okay, right?
Yeah, exactly. Be like, huh,
you wouldn't get like I feel like, I mean, obviously, I think that having your favorite anime be something that's not like quote unquote mainstream is like kind of a lame idea, and it's not like the measure of your fanness, I guess. The measure, like,
it's like that hipster mentality.
Exactly,
like, oh, you're
exactly.
Such a conformist.
It is 100% that hipster mentality, and I think it's like I think that sucks. I think that's bunk.
It does suck.
And so, if someone's favorite series is Fullmetal Alchemist, it's not going to get you any like anime nerd cred, but it won't get you like lambasted.
Yeah, it won't be like casual.
Yeah, exactly. It won't be like casual. It'll just be like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I like other series more than Brotherhood for different reasons. Right?
Yeah, me
like
too.
I have favorite anime that are not Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but I think Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is a masterclass in terms of writing character and theme and intertwining those into anime as like a medium. And as a piece of media, I think it's so important, period.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like not even as an anime, but as a piece of media, it is important.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be taken from it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, again, I keep coming back to this feeling of, but it's still not my favorite anime, but it is something that I could watch forever and never get tired of.
Me too.
Right? It is like the homemade, well, I was gonna say like chicken noodle soup, but really it's like whatever your mom or your grandma made you for when you were sick, right? It's just something you can kind of eat all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, other shows may be like, oh, expensive lobster or Wagyu beef. But if you ate that every day, you would get sick of it easy.
Mm-hmm.
I very much think that anime is similar. I could watch I watched all of the original series and then all of Brotherhood back to back.
That's what I was gonna say.
Over the course of a week.
Take it from us. We watched all of these series back to back. In the span of 2 weeks.
I watch a lot of anime, and there are very few I could do that with.
I was worried that, after having finished the original series and having to immediately jump into Brotherhood, I was just like, oh no, what if I get into that fatigue and then it'll affect my opinion of Brotherhood. But as soon as I started up episode 1 and I was in it, I was just like, I'm not tired at all. I could watch this all day.
Yeah, I could watch Fullmetal Alchemist forever. I think when it comes down to it, it is the story structure of Fullmetal Alchemist is so unique that it is nigh impossible to get tired of. Every single, because I know what happens every time I watch it. I rewatched Brotherhood recently before this rewatch. I think I watched it over like winter break or something.
Yeah.
But I rewatched it again and I was like, oh my god, this still goes so hard. Because every time that first opening kicks in for Brotherhood, you're like, oh, we go again!
Yes!
We go again!
Again!
And then anytime one of those like real cool twists happens, I'm like, yeah! There are legitimately moments in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood where I cannot help but grin at how good it is. Like how hype it makes me feel. Yeah.
I think for me one of those moments was Olivier Armstrong.
God, she's so cool. I love her.
She's one of the coolest main characters. Well, she's not main, but she's like one of the most important characters in the latter half of the series.
She's got that big dick energy. You can actually say that for most of the women in this series.
They're all really, really good.
Right. This is honestly why I don't have a problem with Brotherhood killing off lust so early. Because, my god, it happens way earlier than you think it does. Every time.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah,
oh,
I was just like, oh, they're already facing off.
she's dead. And the reason I don't think it's like the greatest sin of all time is because there is a huge cast of amazing, strong female characters, and they're all strong in their own ways. And
yeah,
that is how you write women characters. Like, you can't just have one person be there to stand in for all women. You have to have this diversity of women and have them all have different things that they want. Like, my God, it is so nice that we get like Izumi Curtis, who is, you know, physically very strong, you know, a very good alchemist, a good person who also desperately wants to be a mother. Like, that's the greatest wish she has in the world, contrasted with, you know, Olivier Armstrong, who doesn't give a shit about any of that, and she just wants to be doing her job effectively.
Yep.
And yet she still is shown to be like soft, quote unquote, when it comes to her crew. You know, she's like,
yes,
she gives out this aura of being like cold and imposing, but even then she's just she's like, you know, she gives the instructions like, you know, if you are not back in 24 hours, we'll close the gates. But then she gives them a broken watch so that it never comes.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
and it's so good because it's not necessarily like a feminine quality, like, oh, all women have a soft spot. It's like all the characters, like all people in general, have a soft, quote unquote, soft spot, right?
Right. Well,
they have something they care about.
The feelings that are ascribed to these characters are not inherently, you know, masculine or feminine.
Exactly.
But they're all nuanced in such an important way. Like, Winry is a character that doesn't fight, but if she wasn't there, the series couldn't happen. Right?
Yeah.
Like, she's there to support the boys, and she's such an important like contrast to them. And
she also has like her own arc though too. Like that whole confrontation with Scar and her was so powerful. I was like, oh my god, this never happens in the original series. Oh my god.
Like, it's such a good moment when you know, Ed is like, you know, your hands are not made for killing, they're made for healing.
Yeah.
And that is such a good moment because it characterizes all of the characters in that scene so strongly. You know, you have Ed who bears the burden of killing on himself, right? He never purposely kills anybody, but he bears the burden of violence. He says like Al, I did this to you. I'm going to become the state alchemist. I'm going to become a dog of the military. And you know, by that very nature, he is kind of bearing that cross, and so he doesn't want Winry to have to do it. And you know, Winry wants Ed and Al to talk about things and not be so shut into themselves only all the time. You know, she wants to support them, right? And that's different. She's strong in a different way from the other female characters, and that's what's so important. And like, there's also like supporting male characters too, and mwah, so good. I could talk about the way that Fullmetal Alchemist characterizes all of its characters with nuance and depth in forever, basically. Forever.
Each character.
Each character. Like, and I mean, let's not undersell the fact that like the main character of Fullmetal Alchemist is a disabled boy, right? He's got physical disabilities that are, and this is my favorite thing of all time, they're never like swept under the rug either. Every single time that it is shown to be in Ed's like favor for him to have that automail arm or leg is like, oh, so good. And I love it when it gets destroyed and he can't do anything. And I love it when he gets a new arm and he's like, haha, guess what, Scar? It's made of a different metal. That was honestly my favorite. I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah, it was so good.
It was like, hey, it's carbon fiber. Yeah, I mean, above all else, I love that all the characters care about things. Like, they all care about things so deeply that they are willing to go to the ends of the earth to accomplish those things, and they do. Oh my god, it's so good. Like even Hohenheim is like, oh, you're such a bad dad, and you just left. Is you eventually learn his reasons for leaving too, and you're like, well, okay.
Yeah, you're like, okay.
All right, I guess. And then, by the end, you're like, all right, Hohenheim, you're not too bad. And
yeah.
And then you're like,
you kind of like, as a viewer, because you're in the viewpoint of Ed, you kind of like have an inherent animosity towards him because of what he did. Because you're seeing everything through Ed's point of view. And then towards the end, I feel like we as a viewer feel the same way towards Hohenheim as Ed does, which is like this begrudging acceptance of, okay, you weren't such a bad dad. Like, yeah, it's you weren't a totally awful person.
It's so good that the way that they build it, and like, yeah, visually too, there's a lot of gradual growth, because Fullmetal Alchemist is a series about growth and moving forward and living. Yeah, but like the fact that Ed so gradually gets taller is so good, especially after his automail has been switched out to the lighter model.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that they take into account the measurements for him too when they were adjusting his automail. Like, oh, you got a little bit taller.
Yeah, I wrote this down, but Ed is the same height as Winry in episode 39 of Brotherhood, and in episode 46, Ed is noticeably taller, and that's like 3 months.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, that makes sense. He's like 16 when the series starts happening, like in full. So he actually starts growing, especially when they take those fucking weights off his arms. Like, I love that every little detail that is of some importance is accounted for.
I love that they even explained, like, the fact that Hohenheim, Al, and Ed have gold hair and golden eyes.
Yeah, they're from the country that exploded.
Yeah. It's like, oh, so that's why the dad genes are so strong in these kids, because it's significant to his history. Right.
And I mean, it is really interesting the way that the show and the series in general deals with this kind of like the sins of the father thing, right? It's like there's a lot of moral quandaries surrounding situations that cannot be avoided and what to do in those situations, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye because I think their arc is really good. I think their dynamic is one of the best duo dynamics in anime.
Yes.
And I love that in Brotherhood it's revealed where Mustang gets his fire alchemy.
Yes! His flame alchemy!
And also, like, the burden that they both carry from that and from the Ishvalan War is so good. Like, my goodness. It explores. I feel like it explores military violence in such an honest way, and in a way that doesn't like pull any punches. Yeah. It's like you have all these people who obviously have entered the military, and they're good people, and they've entered for good reasons, and they still do harm. Like, yeah,
I love the different stories that they tell with the different alchemists and their reactions to the war throughout the series.
Right, like, God knows, like, Mustang is not a black and white character because he participated in a genocide.
Yes. And so did Riza. And I love the explanation that she says where the difference between her as a sniper and the alchemist versus a regular soldier, right? Where if you send out a sniper or an alchemist, you're guaranteed someone's going to die. Versus a soldier, it's like, oh, there's a chance that, you might miss or whatever, right? But I also like the other soldiers' stories too, where you have like Kimberly, who relished in the violence of the war to the point of wanting to do it all over again.
Oh yeah.
Versus Armstrong, who he ran away from the war holding a dead child in his arms. He was crying.
Right.
And he was admonished by his sister, who thought of him as, weak and useless and not responsible for the duty that he signed up for.
I also love that the designs for Kimberly in the original series and in Brotherhood are two sides of the same douche coin. Like his haircut in the original series is so bad in exactly the way that Kimberly would wear. Whereas in Brotherhood, his white suit is so terribly gaudy in exactly the way that Kimberly would wear. Like,
Yes.
he's a character that is so easy to dislike on purpose, and then also, and even Kimberly in the end, you feel something for, because he's just like, oh, what's this? Like, his douchebaggery actually comes in handy for when Pride tries to eat Ed.
It transcended. I loved it.
I that moment was so good. I was like, oh.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, I like that Kimberly is a character that is so obviously a villain, and yet also is a character who is solely guided by his desire to fulfill his goal.
He is on his own side, and so I think for the most part, he's like the classic antagonist where he's basically opposed to what the protagonist is supporting, right? And I mean, that's the definition of an antagonist. But then towards the end, because his goal and the protagonist's goal align, he ends up being a force for quote unquote good.
Right. At the very
but
least,
his
he's
goals never
impeding
change.
evil.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, it is. I love the way that it doesn't treat these issues as black and white.
Yes.
That the people in general are a spectrum, and
yeah,
I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Cute.
I do want to talk about the homunculi.
Homunculi.
Kind of like thematically. I love that in Brotherhood we get a much more subtle and nuanced portrayal of homunculi as wanting to be humans.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at the end of the day, Father as a character is somebody who wanted to transcend humans and at the same time wanted to be human. Not that like he would acknowledge that.
Right.
But, you know, what you get from this like kind of story that we get is, you know, an artificial creature, homunculus, dwarf in the flask, who wanted to be free, and basically what you ended up finding is that, you know, he was looking for freedom in the wrong places, and
exactly.
And this is something that Hohenheim even says. You know, he says like,
yep.
You know, like, you berated humans for having to form communities, but isn't that what you really wanted? Because
yep.
you know, he excises all of his, like, you know, like human qualities, his like cardinal sins into homunculi, yes. And then they call him father, like they're a family unit.
Yeah. And it just shows like that psychological tell of, this was what you really wanted. You formed it without even realizing it, and you didn't know what you had until, you know, the rug got pulled out from beneath you. I think that was brilliant. I do think it was interesting that they talk about the homunculi and the seven sins, but they never, at least from what I saw, never once mentioned the seven virtues, which you would expect because they're the direct, you know, contrast to the seven sins. And I think that was extremely purposeful. Like, something like that is a lot less identifiable in this kind of story, but is told basically through the struggles and the stories of the other characters.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that even like the fact that there are no named characters after the seven virtues is, I think that's
exactly
purposeful. And at the same time, I think to some extent we can look at the deaths of of each of the homunculi as the moment of virtue, right? It's kind of that it's
yeah.
kind of that ironic, like the same way that the alchemists, when they perform human transmutation, they get that which is most important to them taken away.
Yeah.
Right? In a certain way, it happens to the homunculi. So you have Pride, who basically has to, give up his pride when he's dying, and then is turned into a baby, which is humility. That's the ultimate humility of having to return to childhood. You have Envy, who realizes that he's envious of humans, right? And the connections that they have, and is Envy is basically shown kindness, which is the matching virtue, and as a result kills himself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what Envy cannot stand is the look of pity that Ed gives him, right? Because that is a moment of Ed showing kindness towards Envy.
Yeah.
Gluttony gets eaten. I mean, that's just ironic.
Gluttony.
I mean, lust is killed by a man who can essentially never like fulfill his romantic goals, right? Like, for one reason or another, for all of the reasons that Riza Hakai and Mustang are connected, they cannot, they can't be together, basically. Even though they want to. Wrath is just satisfied. He's not angry anymore, and then he dies.
Yeah, it becomes old man. He died.
He becomes an old man, and then, I mean, greed, I think, is pretty obvious, right? Like, when greed dies, it is the moment when his greed is somewhat. It's like it's sated, basically. His greed is sated, because he realizes that all of the material goods in the world and all that wouldn't fill the hole in his heart, right? But it was in his last moments that he did something selfless. That's really on the nose, right? Like, he sacrifices himself so that Father can be defeated, and so you have that, and then Sloth. The Sloth isn't super well developed as a character. He's just kind of a big slow boy, but the opposite of Sloth is diligence. And if you want to think about that, I mean, I would say that the Armstrong family is like the picture of diligence. Like,
yes,
Olivia is someone who basically never gave up ever, or rested ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the way that the homunculi end up is pretty similar to the way that the alchemists end up on the other end of human transmutation.
Yeah, I think the people that they face off with and who ultimately, I guess, are responsible for quote unquote killing them are as guilty of the sins that they represent, but also represent the virtues that they are juxtaposed with.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's not like a black or white thing again either, right? Because
of course,
it is clearly shown that Father is less equipped to, like, Father is less perfect because he lacks the sins, quote unquote, right?
Yeah,
like these, because in excess they are sins, but in moderation they are simply human desire.
Yeah,
right. So because Father forsakes the very thing that makes him closer to humanity, that's ultimately his downfall, because his sins went on to embody more and more human traits. Greed especially.
Yeah.
And I think also Wrath to some extent is a very interesting character to look at. Which, okay, let's start by talking about the fact that his first name is King, and most people didn't know that.
I had no idea.
His name is King Bradley. Like, his first name is King. I'm gonna be honest. The first time I ever watched Fullmetal Alchemist, I thought Führer King was a title.
That's what I thought. I was like, oh, okay, so he's the Fuhrer, but they call him King Bradley, right? I thought that was just part of the whole name scheme. But his name is King.
No, his name is literally King. It's just that when you introduce all of this like subtlety in the naming scheme, but then you translate it to English, none of it is subtle anymore.
I feel like also because his last name could be
his last
first
name could
name
also
too.
be a first
that
name.
also
Yeah,
threw me off. Yeah,
I mean, it's like it would be like if you named characters like thematically in line with their characters in like another language. Like if I wrote a book and I wrote all of the characters' names in Japanese, nobody would be like, oh, you wrote this.
If we named a character Shogun, oh my god.
Right, exactly. Like if you named a character something that is symbolic in another language, but like is like really obvious in that language, then like of course, right? Like, oh, Riza Hawkeye, Takane no Mei. Like, yeah, the Hawk's Eye, Hawkeye, I get it. But I mean, that aside, it's whatever. Whatever. I think that Wrath is super interesting because he is the only one who gets to be that close to humanity. Like he gets to age. He never got the opportunity to choose anything for himself. His entire life was this path laid out for him, except for his wife. And I think that's
his wife. I
think that's like, my God, that was such a good subtle moment.
Yeah,
because they and this is again credit to Hiromu Arakawa for never forgetting anything. Like they mention it once when Riza is his assistant, and I think that's a great moment because it is the moment where Wrath is like, oh, I may not be a human being, but at least I get to like choose the person I want to be with, whereas you cannot. Right? And that's where Hawkeye both, gets egged, first of all.
Egged.
But at the same time, she like sees herself in Bradley, in Führer King Bradley. And like that's the moment of reflection of the human in the non-human. Because obviously, like the homunculi are shaped like humans. They're meant to act as foils for the human characters, and the fact that it comes up later again when he's dying is so good. Like, this is legitimately how you inform character without just like info dumping people, right? Yes. The exchange between Wrath and Scar, where it's just like, do you have any message for your wife or whatever, like any last words for your wife or whatever, and he's just like, she's the woman I chose, of course I don't need to, right? Like that's such a good line. Like it's so strong and it says so much in so little. It's like she knows what she's getting into, she my wife. Right. And I mean, like, she doesn't know he's a homunculus, but at the same time, you can tell that even then there's some attachment for him there as something that he got to choose for himself and maybe like, as a person, right? And like even pride is to like that to some extent. He's just like,
that's what I was thinking too.
Like even he admits like it wasn't terrible, right? It was kind of fun. It's kind of like I wondered if this was what having a family was like, and like as the first homunculus, right, as the one closest to father, right, that feels like such a, I mean, like feels like a deep cut right there.
Yeah, like the whole moment where he's explaining why he has any kind of feeling whatsoever toward his quote unquote mom, right, and how he couldn't understand why on earth she would risk her own life just to save him. He thought that humans were lesser than that. But he admits that she's one of the rare exceptions that he's seen. And it was so good. And the fact that he ends up with her at the end. Oh. Yeah,
that was adorable. I also think that to some extent that is it explains kind of one of the potential plot holes, which is like, what if they just like left, right? But it's like, oh, we know what you're like, you know, you wouldn't. And you know, it's true, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Ishval a little bit. Ishval. It's very well done.
Good, we did it.
Congratulations. No, I mean, the thing about Ishval is, as an American viewer watching it, it will immediately kind of like set off some familiar themes to stuff that happens, especially if you grow up around now.
American history.
Not
the best history.
No. Yeah, it's very interesting because it was the experience of the Ishvalans were primarily drawn from the Ainu people, is I think what Hiromu Arakawa said in an interview. So when she was writing Fullmetal Alchemist, she essentially used, you know, the Ainu people experience as inspiration for Ishval, which makes a lot of sense, to be fair. Like, oh, it's a piece of media about a corrupt military enacting genocide for like bad purposes. That sounds like Japan.
Yeah, that actually is really surprising to me. I thought that she was going for the whole Germany Jewish genocide.
I mean, I also think that's a lot of that inspiration because of how Amestris is basically just like fantasy
it's basically
Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where the original
and they're
series
all Aryan looking.
I mean, to the point where the original series is like, oh, this is real Germany.
Yeah, I mean, and the whole scene where, you know, Scar unfortunately murders Winry's parents is because they look so Aryan, aka Armestrian, with the blonde hair and blue eyes, and he gets haunted by the blue eyes that
yeah, I mean,
he murders them on sight.
Like, what I really like about that is it refuses to play into this really simplistic view of what war is like. You know, even conflict like the Ishvalan conflict, where Amestris basically comes in and enacts genocide, right? Where it on a large scale is obviously bad because it was a cover up for, you know, creating eventually this thing. Like, I think Hawkeye actually says something to this effect where it doesn't matter if it was the homunculi that orchestrated the event. Like, they were still the ones who carried it out. They were still the ones who were on the ground killing people. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
It refuses to absolve characters of their responsibility in enacting and furthering this conflict, right? It's not just like, oh, well, I mean, you know, the military said to do it, so I mean, I guess you can't be at fault. You know, it acknowledges so clearly that like you know, it was the military that said we should do it, but we still did it.
Yeah, I think they do occasionally have like an NPC or two that are like, well, we did this because blah blah blah, like we were right and that kind of thing, and those people are so quickly like admonished as pieces of trash. And I'm thinking of like the people who were on King Bradley's council, for example.
No, they were
the
so
ones
terrible.
That get rounded up at the end. Yeah.
I mean, I also love that they were basically all like sheeple.
They were so sheeple.
Like, they couldn't do anything for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is such a powerful statement about the kinds of violence that the military enacts, not just on the people it is doing violence to, but the people who are enacting that violence for the sake of the military, right?
Yeah.
It is like, it shows how even a one-sided conflict like the Ishvalan War, which was not a war but a genocide, right, is there are still situations like Scar, who is rightfully angry about his people and rightfully taking his revenge, you know, what he sees as retribution, and yet he killed two people who we as like the audience and, you know, some of the characters know are completely innocent, right? Like it so refuses to play into a simple narrative about war, like, oh, war is bad, etc., right? Even like even Grandma Pinako talks about how even though the war was terrible, the fact that it was terrible means that there's a lot of business for automail makers, right? It's like, my children died in this war, but this war is the same reason we can put bread on the table. It's I love the ways in which it refuses to be like a stereotype or an archetype or like a simple reading of a conflict. Like,
I think it resonates so well. I also love their treatment of someone like Ed who rolls in after all of that and has no idea, or has only like basically heard of the Ishvalan War because it has happened recently and it, you know, it took Winry's parents' lives, but they don't actually know what it was like.
Right. Like the only experience they've had with the war is that Winry's parents died in it.
Exactly. And no one in the military can properly explain what happened. They just have to let the boys learn it on their own.
Yeah.
Because there's no words that can actually be put to the things that they did.
Yeah, I love that we get characters like Scar, who, like, Scar isn't a good guy, but he's also not a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's murdering people, and murder is bad, but also, is murder bad if your entire people got genocided? Probably, but also, right? It's never just one answer. It's like, and Scar comes around to his own answer, right? To his own truth eventually, where he's just like, you know, I will do work for my people, right? So that you know, we can live in peace or whatever. And like, you have characters like Miles, who is a mixed race person, who is like, you know, I can I want to help bridge this gap, right? Like, I want to do this from the inside. And you have people like Olivier Armstrong, who is like, I need people like you, Miles, because you can see all these perspectives that I can't. And that's like,
yes.
My goodness, I would not have like expected that from a Western author so much as like someone living in Japan right now. Like, it is so surprisingly poignant and honest and clear about the stance it takes on things.
Like, especially considering Japan is mostly a homogenous culture, like, and that they can have, at least Arakawa can have that kind of view and implement it so well in her story about, you know, mixed race people. Like, at least Miles, his point of view when he talks about it is that he says that he's probably the only one who can help be the bridge,
right?
Because of his heritage.
It's interesting because it for a lot of it, I think a lot of it resonates with people from Western audiences in ways that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah,
and I mean, I think that it is pretty clear that each of I mean, I want to move on actually, but I like that the conflict is not presented to be like a black and white thing, even though it's like a terrible tragedy, right? It's like, obviously what the military did was not right, but we still sympathize with characters like Mustang and Hawkeye and Hughes, who were there in the conflict on the ground, you know, killing people, but who still are working towards something, right? To change. And then like
I think it would have been easy to just skip over that, but she takes it head on in writing these characters.
right, like they're never absolved of their sins. It's something that they have to live with as soldiers, right? Even if the reason they're there is to change it. And yeah, I think that all of it really comes down to Hiromu Arakawa. From what I've read from Fullmetal Alchemist and from Silver Spoon, has this like central philosophy to all of her writing, which is the philosophy of living. It is so strong in both of those works about how, you know, there's no right path, there's no right way to go, there's only the path that you choose to go, but you can't stop taking it. You can take detours, you can stop along the side of the road for a while, but you have to keep going, right? It's this idea that running away isn't cowardly or bad, but something that can give you a new perspective or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
It's this idea that no matter what, you have to keep living so that you can change, right? It's like this philosophy of change.
Yeah.
Because like all of the characters in Fullmetal Alchemist have been through unimaginable amounts of tragedy, and at the end of the day, like, they're still alive, most of them. I mean, listen, you have to watch Hughes die 3 different times. That's pretty rough.
Oh.
But like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's literally a moment where Ed says to Al, like, you know, we're still alive, so we have to keep going.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yep.
it is this, you know, this perpetual motion of we can't stay the same and we can't go back to the way we were, so we have to keep moving. The dead are gone and they're not coming back, right? Like, they realize that the reason that that human transmutation never works is because, like, once a person dies, the soul is just gone. Like, there's nowhere for it to come back from. It's just not there anymore, right?
Yeah.
So even if they can get a body, right, the soul is like, that's it. And yeah, it has a lot of very interesting ideas about, you know, truth and God. Like that was, I think, maybe one of my favorite things also about Fullmetal Alchemist, in addition to like this philosophy of living, is the way that it treats truth and the way that it treats religion, and the way in which it acknowledges that everyone has their own truths, and maybe you call it God or maybe you call it something else, but you know, that's the reason why everyone has their own gate of truth, because everyone for themselves, like, truth is a subjective thing.
Yeah.
So who's your favorite character?
Oh no. Oh no. Who was my favorite? But there's so many, Sue.
Oh, I know. Here,
Why?
give me a ranking from 1 to 3.
Oh no.
Number 1, number 2, number 3.
Oh jeez. I have like small small favorites, right? Like people that I'm really glad got more of an arc than in the original series. Like, I really like how they treated Dr. Marco, for example. Even though he's like such a minor character, the fact that he's also he you know is another perspective on how war affects those involved, where, you know, he experimented on Ishvalan people and soldiers and whatnot, and at the end of the day, was when he was confronted by Scar, was like, you know what, you deserve to do whatever it is that you want to me. I did horrible things to your people that I can never repent for. My life is yours. And then Scar decides to spare him because he's more useful alive than dead, and then Dr. Marco, in a very small way, is able to help repent by doing something really big, which was figuring out Scar's brother's research. So in a sense, if Scar hadn't learned how to be merciful by that point, then they never would have been able to figure out the research and have the other circle inscribed on his arm.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. I love Scar as a character.
Oh god,
I
Scar
love
is so
May.
good.
May's a small but wonderful character too. Who else? Ling too. I love Ling and Greed. Oh my god, their whole conflict was so good.
Greedling was my Greed.
Greedling.
Greed and Ling are my number one spot.
They're really good.
I'm counting them as the same person because they come in the same body. I love. Oh my goodness! Every single time I see the moment of conflict and Greed after he kills what's his face.
Oh yeah, I was like, and then when he broke down and cried, I was like, oh Greed.
That was my favorite. I love Greed's character arc in Brotherhood.
Yeah, it was really.
That's
really
my
good.
top character.
Yeah.
And then it probably just goes down from there. Riza, Hawkeye, Roy Mustang.
Riza, Hawkeye, Roy Mustang.
Mustang can be my number 3 boy. I have his Nendoroid. I'm gonna get that Hawkeye Nendoroid too. I want to make him hold hands.
I like how they treated Barry in Brotherhood too.
Oh yeah,
he got a more of a character development thing. Like they don't have that whole like confrontation where Ed is in the freezer with him. Because I guess that just never happens in Brotherhood or in the manga.
I have no idea. I actually kind of wanted to read faster to see if I could get to that point, but then I didn't. Oh well.
It's fine.
Yeah, I think that was cool. I liked the fact that Barry came back.
I think it was cool that he got to see his own body, and he was kind of like the foil for Alphonse.
Yes, he certainly was. I also love that he's just like, I don't care if I was made up. Like, I'm here to do one thing, and that's cut people up.
Yeah, and then at the end, he's like, "No, don't kill me now!
No, I still have people to kill!"
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a favorite. I love them all.
I know the characters in this show are so likable. It's so hard to pick.
Yeah.
Except for Greed.
Yeah.
I love Greed.
Greed's really good. I liked Envy at the end. You know, that whole emotional spillage of everything that was Envy.
I kind of love that Envy is just like a shitlord right till the end.
Yeah, right till the end, and then but no, you can't help but feel bad for him. Like, just
I love. Oh my god, watching Envy get toasted by Mustang is so good though. It's so cathartic.
God. Yeah. I love that little showdown where it was like Dr. Marco versus Envy, or Dr. Marco and the Chimera versus Envy, and it was like, oh no, they're gonna get roasted. Do they know what they're doing? And then and then it becomes a thing. I was like, they're doing it.
Fullmetal Alchemist does an amazing job of doing justice to all of its characters and making sure that they get their dues, and the development that they need, and everything ends so satisfyingly. I love that at the end it's not just like, oh, by the way, we never got anything. It's so grimdark and terrible. I love that it's at the end this like pretty much everyone, like, it was tragic. It sucked. There were a lot of people that just died, but like, we're still alive and we managed to achieve what we wanted to, but there's still things out there to do. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It is so strongly tied to this philosophy of continuing to live and grow and change. And like, that is ultimately why, Father lost, because he didn't do any of that. He just stayed the same for like a bajillion years.
Yeah, I loved that lesson a lot, that whole message. And yeah, I agree. I do like the fact that they show that, yeah, this is a fictional story and, you know, there's character growth and development, but it doesn't just wrap up like that. Like, it doesn't stop with them having completed one journey, because they can just start another one right after. Like, they become different people than when they started, but there's still some things that, you know, that you can't change that are part of who you are, right? Like, Ed and Al still want to go and find out more about alchemy and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is good, because
Okay.
my goodness, we've been talking for a long time.
I expected as much.
It's so good.
It's Full Metal.
Fullmetal Alchemist.
Hagane no Renkin Jitsushi.
Hagane no Renkin Jutsushi. I love it. The sub was so good.
It.
Hagane no.
Hagane no. Oh, King Bradley.
Oh.
He opened that up for Ed to be made fun of.
You know he did. All right. Well, what are you up to this week? And also, where can we find you on the internet?
Bruh, I will be preparing for my conventions that are happening in 2 weeks. I'm guessing, since we'll be skipping next time's podcast.
No, next time
we'll
we'll be here.
Oh, we'll be here next time?
Yeah, because
Aren't you on the road by that point?
no, I'm going to New York this Thursday, and I'm coming back on Monday.
Okay.
So the 20th, and then I will
Okay.
be here until at least September starts.
Oh, so you're going to the Europe in September.
Yes.
Okay, then that's fine. Then the podcast is on.
It sure is. We will be talking about Devilman Crybaby.
Oh, have fun watching that.
I will.
Maybe if I have it in me, I'll rewatch it. But it took a lot out of me. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I guess I should name the conventions I'm going to. I'll be going to Queen City Anime Con in Charlotte, North Carolina on the weekend of the 23rd. And then on Labor Day weekend, I will be in San Antonio at San Japan.
Wow.
That'll be fun.
Wow.
And yeah.
Wow. Wow.
But yeah, you can find me on Twitch and on Twitter and on Tumblr and Facebook and all social medias at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. How about you, Soup?
This week I'm going to New York, and also I have been streaming lately, kind of.
The Stardews. I saw it.
Mostly I've just been streaming Stardew Valley with some of my friends, and there won't be any from now and until after the 20th, so keep that in mind. But you can find me on all the places at Literal Soup. My Twitch and my Twitter are both that, so if I'm on a place, it's probably that one.
Did you make soup in your farm yet?
I haven't made soup in my farm yet. I've received soup from somewhere that I don't remember. Mystery trout soup.
From your own existence.
But we're still working on that one, and we are well into winter, I think. So we're just doing a lot of fishing right now. Which
I was gonna say, what are you doing now that you don't have plants to water
all your
literally
crops
all
die,
day?
so you kind of just like wander around and go to the mines and you fish.
Yeah. You have to do other things now.
I will be playing Dungeons and Dragons tomorrow. We are recording on the 13th, so it is currently Monday,
Whoa.
which means it will happen on the 14th. So by the time this episode comes out, it'll probably already be up. Or probably already have happened, rather. Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
If you're recording it, are you posting it?
I'm not recording it, and I will not be posting it.
Okay, I thought you said you were recording.
No,
Sorry.
I will.
I think you said
I'll tell you about it afterwards, if you want.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
But other than that, I am pretty much just playing Grand Blue Fantasy and watching anime. Same old, same old. Okay,
Oh, he got you this time, dude.
Akechigoro, eat your fucking heart out.
He's gonna make you eat your heart out.
Fullmetal Alchemist.
Full